From the 68th floor of the Cambridge Tower in downtown Boston, Elijah Harmon could see the entire city spread beneath him like a living map. The morning sun reflected off the Charles River, casting golden ripples across the water. But Elijah wasn't looking at the view. He was absorbed in the holographic display floating in front of him, monitoring the vital signs of Unforeseen, the company he had built from nothing into one of the most revolutionary tech firms in America. At 28, Elijah was already a legend in the tech world. Born to a wealthy Middle Eastern family but raised in the United States after his parents relocated when he was a child, he had rejected the path his traditional family had laid out for him. Instead of joining the family business, he had used his inheritance to found Unforeseen, a company that specialized in artificial intelligence and urban connectivity solutions that were transforming cities across Latin America and now expanding into North America. "Mr. Harmon, your 9 a.m. is here," announced the AI assistant through the apartment's sound system. Elijah checked his watch, a sleek, minimalist timepiece worth more than most people's cars. "Send them up in 5 minutes." His penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of the tower, a space of immaculate white marble, floor-to-ceiling glass, and cutting-edge technology. Everything in his environment was controlled, optimized, and predictable, just the way he liked. To the world outside might be chaotic, but in here algorithms maintained perfect harmony. Elijah straightened his custom-tailored suit and moved toward his home office. The space functioned as an extension of his corporate headquarters 40 floors below, allowing him to maintain control while keeping a comfortable distance. Human connections were messy, unpredictable, and ultimately disappointing. Lessons he'd learned early and reinforced often. When the elevator doors slid open, Elijah was standing behind his desk, ready to meet the new executive assistant his HR department had hired. His previous assistant had lasted 8 months, the longest of any to date. Elijah had exacting standards and little patience for incompetence. What he wasn't prepared for was the woman who entered his penthouse. She navigated through the doorway in a wheelchair, moving with practiced ease. Her posture was impeccable, her attire professional and sharp, a navy blue blazer over a crisp white blouse, her dark hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. What struck him most, however, were her eyes, intelligent, unflinching, and completely unintimidated by either his wealth or his reputation. For perhaps the first time in his adult life, Elijah found himself momentarily speechless. It wasn't prejudice that stunned him. It was the complete disruption of his expectations, the sudden introduction of an unknown variable into his carefully controlled environment. "Good morning, Mr. Harmon. I'm Olivia Reed, your new executive." "Assistant," she said, extending her hand. Her voice was confident, professional, with a slight Boston accent that suggested local roots. Elijah collected himself quickly, stepping forward to shake her hand. "Ms. Reed, welcome to Unforeseen." He gestured toward the seating area, which suddenly seemed problematic to him. Had anyone considered accessibility when designing this space? Had he? "Thank you," she replied, smoothly navigating to the indicated area. "I've reviewed all the materials sent over this weekend. I understand your schedule is particularly demanding this quarter, with the expansion into the Chicago market." Elijah nodded, impressed despite himself. Most new assistants spent their first day getting oriented. "That's correct. We're facing resistance from established infrastructure companies there. They don't appreciate disruption. I took the liberty of compiling a brief on each of the board members of those companies," Olivia said, sending a file to his holographic display with a few taps on her tablet. "I've highlighted personal interests and potential alignment points that might soften their stance." Elijah scanned the document quickly, raising an eyebrow at the depth of information and the strategic insights offered. This was executive-level thinking, not administrative work. "This is thorough," he acknowledged, studying her with new interest. "Your resume mentioned a background in strategic communications." "Yes, I worked at Meridian Partners for 3 years before coming here," she replied. "I specialized in technology integration strategies for municipal governments." Elijah frowned slightly. "That's a significant career shift, coming to work as my assistant." Olivia met his gaze directly. "Is it? Your assistant needs to understand your business thoroughly, anticipate needs before they arise, and remove obstacles from your path. My background gives me a unique perspective on exactly what you're trying to accomplish with UrbanSync. And what am I trying to accomplish, Ms. Reed? He asked, genuine curiosity mixing with a hint of challenge in his voice. You're not just building smart cities, Mr. Harmon. You're fundamentally changing how people interact with urban environments. But technology alone won't create that change. You need strategic relationships with the human elements of those cities. That's where I come in. The boldness of her assessment and its accuracy caught him off guard. Most people told Elijah what they thought. He wanted to hear. Olivia Reed seemed incapable of such artifice. Their orientation meeting extended well beyond the scheduled hour as Elijah tested her knowledge and insights. By the time they finished reviewing his upcoming week, he had to admit, privately, of course, that HR had found someone exceptional. I think that covers everything for now, he said finally. You'll have access to all necessary systems by end of day. My previous assistant kept detailed protocols. I expect they'll be followed precisely. I've already reviewed Jacob's protocols, Olivia replied. They're efficient but outdated in several areas. I'll implement improvements and submit them for your approval by tomorrow morning. Elijah felt a flicker of irritation at her presumption, followed immediately by reluctant respect. Very well. We'll discuss your improvements tomorrow. As she turned to leave, a momentary power fluctuation caused the lights to dim briefly. Such occurrences were rare in his technologically fortified tower, but not unheard of. The building's power grid is experiencing minor instabilities today, Olivia commented. Maintenance is working on it, but they're forecasting possible disruptions throughout the day. You might want to move your virtual meeting with Tokyo to the downtown office as a precaution. Elijah stared after her as she exited. How had she known about that issue when he, with all his monitoring systems, hadn't been informed? Later that afternoon, as predicted, a more significant power outage hit the tower. Emergency systems kept essential functions running, but Elijah found himself standing at his window, watching as sections of the city briefly went dark before backup systems engaged. His phone buzzed with a message from Olivia. Power restoration estimated at 90 minutes. I've rescheduled your afternoon calls and sent a car to bring you to the downtown office if needed. Elijah typed back, How did you know about the power issues this morning? The response came quickly. I spoke with the maintenance staff when I arrived. Sometimes the most valuable information comes from people, not systems. Elijah put down his phone, strangely unsettled. In his precisely controlled world of data and algorithms, Olivia Reed represented something entirely different, an unpredictable human element that his systems couldn't fully analyze or anticipate. For reasons he couldn't quite articulate, that both disturbed and intrigued him. 2 weeks after Olivia Reed's arrival, Elijah found himself reluctantly acknowledging that she was the most effective assistant he'd ever employed. Her ability to anticipate problems, streamline processes, and manage his professional life with minimal input was unprecedented. She had already revised his scheduling system, improved vendor relationships, and somehow managed to arrange a meeting with the notoriously inaccessible mayor of Chicago, a critical connection for their expansion plans. Yet something about her continued to unsettle him. Unlike his previous assistants, who had been intimidated by his abrupt manner and exacting standards, Olivia remained unfazed. When she disagreed with him, which she did with surprising frequency, she did so with reasoned arguments backed by solid data. More disconcerting still, she was usually right. The proposal for the Miami project needs revision, Olivia said one morning, wheeling into his office with a tablet in hand. The infrastructure model doesn't account for sea-level projections beyond 5 years. Elijah looked up from his work, frowning. The model uses the industry standard projections, which are deliberately conservative to avoid alarming investors, she countered, sending documents to his screen. These are the latest projections from MIT's Environmental Systems Lab. If we don't account for them now, we're setting up Miami for infrastructure failure within a decade. Elijah reviewed the data, irritation battling with reluctant respect. Revising will set us back 3 weeks. Failing to revise will set Miami back 10 years, Olivia replied evenly, and damage Urban Sync's reputation permanently. She was right, of course. He authorized the revisions that afternoon. Their professional rhythm continued this way, with Olivia's influence gradually extending beyond administrative matters into strategic decisions. Elijah found himself increasingly relying on her insights, though he'd never admit as much aloud. Then came the night that changed everything. Fuck. Massive electrical failure struck downtown Boston, plunging the Cambridge Tower and surrounding blocks into darkness. Even the backup generators failed to engage properly, leaving the building operating on minimal emergency power. Elijah stood at his darkened window, irritated at the disruption to his workflow. His phone buzzed. Olivia again. "All systems will be down for at least 6 hours," her message read. "They're replacing a critical transformer. Your schedule is clear until tomorrow morning." He was about to set the phone down when another message appeared. "Have you ever been to Haymarket?" Elijah frowned at the strange question. "The farmers' market? No. It's open late on Thursdays. They have the best tamales in Boston. Since you're effectively locked out of work anyway, you could use a proper dinner. The building's service elevator is on emergency power. I'll meet you in the lobby in 15 minutes if you're interested." His immediate instinct was to refuse. Social outings with employees were messy, inappropriate, and violated his carefully maintained boundaries. He began typing a polite rejection. Then, he paused, looking around his darkened penthouse. The sleek furniture and marble countertops looked cold and unwelcoming in the dim emergency lighting. The silence felt heavier than usual. To his own surprise, he replied, 15 minutes. When the service elevator opened in the lobby, Olivia was waiting. She had changed from her business attire into jeans and a casual blue sweater that matched. Her eyes, it was the first time he'd seen her in anything but professional wear, and the transformation was striking. "The tea is running," she said with a small smile, "though I'm guessing public transportation isn't typically your style." "I own a transportation company, and I've never used the subway in my own city," Elijah admitted, feeling strangely self-conscious in his casual clothes, designer items that suddenly seemed overly formal outside his corporate context. "First time for everything," Olivia replied, leading the way. The journey to Haymarket was a revelation. The crowded subway car, the bustling streets, the vendors calling out their wares. It was a vibrant, chaotic world that existed just outside his carefully controlled environment. Olivia navigated it all with practiced ease, greeting vendors by name, expertly maneuvering through the narrow spaces between stalls. They settled at a small table in an open-air section of the market, surrounded by string lights and the mingled aromas of dozens of food vendors. Elijah watched in fascination as Olivia ordered in fluent Spanish, securing them plates heaped with tamales, grilled corn, and some kind of fruit drink he didn't recognize. "How did you discover this place?" he asked, surprised by how good the simple food tasted. "I grew up not far from here," she replied. "My father worked at the docks. We'd come to Haymarket every week for groceries. It was cheaper than the supermarkets." It was the first personal information she'd shared, and Elijah found himself hungry for more. "You're from Boston originally, then?" She nodded. "Born and raised. Scholarship to MIT, then straight into the workforce. Not quite the international pedigree you have." "My international pedigree, as you call it, was more of a burden than a blessing," he found himself saying. "My family had very specific expectations. Following my own path wasn't encouraged." "Yet you did it anyway," she observed, studying him with those perceptive eyes. "I did," he agreed, surprised by the ease with which he was sharing these details. "What about you? How did you end up at Urban Sync?" A shadow crossed her face briefly. "Life took an unexpected turn. I was on track for partnership at Meridian until 3 years ago." She gestured toward her wheelchair. "Car accident. Drunk. Driver. After that, certain doors closed." Elijah felt an unfamiliar twist of emotion. "Meridian let you go because of the accident?" "Not officially, of course," she said with a wry smile. But suddenly my leadership potential was questioned. My projects were reassigned. The message was clear enough. That's discriminatory. Illegal, Elijah said, genuine anger rising in him. And extremely difficult to prove, Olivia replied pragmatically. Besides, fighting a lengthy legal battle wasn't how I wanted to spend my energy. I'd rather put that toward building something valuable, like wheelchair accessibility solutions for urban environments, Elijah said, suddenly understanding her particular interest in their work. Among other things, she agreed, the world isn't designed for people like me. That can change with the right technology and, more importantly, the right implementation. As the evening progressed, they talked about everything from urban design challenges to favorite books. Elijah found himself laughing more than he had in years, entranced by Olivia's sharp wit and refreshing honesty. She challenged his assumptions, pushed back on his more cynical views, and somehow made him see his own work in a new light. Our algorithms for traffic management don't account for pedestrians with mobility issues, he realized aloud at one point. They don't, Olivia confirmed. Most don't, but they could. By the time they made their way back to Cambridge Tower, the power was still out, but Elijah barely noticed. His mind was buzzing with new ideas and perspectives. Thank you, he said as they reached the lobby. This was unexpectedly enlightening. The world beyond your glass tower usually is, she replied with a small smile. You should venture out more often. Their eyes met in the dim emergency lighting, and something shifted between them, a moment of connection that transcended their professional relationship. Elijah felt an unfamiliar warmth spreading through his chest, a sensation both alarming and exhilarating. Perhaps I should, he said softly. As he rode the emergency elevator back to his penthouse, Elijah realized that for the first time in years, his precisely ordered world didn't seem quite so perfect anymore. And strangest of all, that realization didn't trouble him as much as it should have. What did trouble him were the new feelings taking root in his heart, emotions he had no algorithm to process, no system to control. The weeks following their impromptu evening at Haymarket brought subtle but significant changes to Elijah's life. The most noticeable was his increasingly frequent ventures beyond his controlled environment. What began as occasional working lunches with Olivia expanded to exploration of neighborhoods he'd never visited, despite years in Boston. Each excursion revealed another facet of the city he thought he knew but had never truly experienced. Their professional relationship remained outwardly unchanged. Olivia was still his executive assistant, still managed his schedule with impeccable efficiency. But something had fundamentally shifted. Their conversations now extended beyond business, touching on personal philosophies, dreams, and the experiences that had shaped them. You've never been to a Red Sox game? Olivia asked incredulously one afternoon as they reviewed plans for the Chicago expansion. That's practically sacrilegious for a Boston resident. Elijah shrugged. Crowded stadiums aren't particularly appealing. Says the man building technology. For urban crowds, she countered with a knowing smile. There's a home game this weekend. You should experience Fenway at least once. To his own surprise, Elijah found himself at Fenway Park that Saturday, seated beside Olivia amidst thousands of passionate fans. The noise, the energy, the collective joy and frustration, it was overwhelming in the best possible way. When the Red Sox scored a home run, Elijah found himself cheering alongside strangers, caught up in a shared moment of pure elation. Now you're getting it, Olivia said, her eyes bright with amusement and something warmer. These moments accumulated, like precious data points, gradually reconstructing Elijah's understanding of what made life valuable. For someone who had built his fortune on connectivity technology, he was only now grasping what true connection felt like. Not everyone at Urban Sync viewed these changes positively. Marcus Whitfield, one of the founding partners and the company's chief investor relations officer, watched the developing situation with growing concern. A man from old Boston money with powerful connections throughout the financial world, Marcus had been instrumental in securing their initial funding, but had always maintained a conservative vision for the company. You've been spending a considerable amount of time with your assistant, Marcus commented during a board meeting break. His tone casual, but his eyes sharp. People are beginning to talk. People always talk, Elijah replied dismissively. Olivia has valuable insights into our urban integration challenges. Marcus's smile didn't reach his eyes. I'm sure she does, but perception matters in our position. The investors in Singapore are particularly traditional. They might question the propriety of such a close working relationship. My working relationships are my business, Elijah said coolly. Not when they affect shareholder value, Marcus countered. Just something to consider. The conversation left Elijah unsettled. For the first time, he found himself torn between the corporate image he had carefully cultivated and the personal growth he was experiencing. The logical part of his brain understood Marcus's concerns from a business perspective. The emerging part of his heart rejected them entirely. His conflicted feelings manifested in subtle withdrawals from Olivia over the following days. Cancelled lunch meetings, briefer interactions, a return to their earlier, more formal dynamic. Olivia noticed the change immediately but said nothing, maintaining her professional demeanor, while the warmth in her eyes gradually dimmed. The situation came to a head during preparations for their presentation to the Chicago City Council. They were working late in Elijah's office, finalizing the proposal that could potentially transform urban mobility for millions. The accessibility features need more emphasis, Olivia insisted, highlighting a section of their presentation. This isn't just about convenience for the average user, it's about equal access for everyone. The City Council is primarily concerned with cost efficiency and implementation timelines, Elijah countered, his tone more dismissive than he'd used with her in weeks. The accessibility features are supplementary. Olivia stared at him, hurt flashing briefly across her face before her professional mask returned. Supplementary. 2 months ago you called them foundational to our mission. What changed? The question hung between them, laden with meaning beyond their immediate discussion. Elijah looked away, uncomfortable with her perceptiveness. Nothing's changed. I'm being pragmatic about our presentation strategy. No, you're pulling back, Olivia said quietly. Not just on this proposal, but on everything we've been building. I'd like to know why. The directness of her question caught him off guard. In the weeks they'd spent together, he'd discovered that Olivia never shied away from difficult truths. It was one of the qualities he most admired in her. Marcus has expressed concerns about our professional relationship, he admitted finally. He believes it could negatively impact investor perceptions. I see. Her voice was measured, but her hands gripped the wheels of her chair tightly. And you agree with his assessment? My personal feelings aren't relevant, Elijah said stiffly. The company's success has to be my priority. Your personal feelings are exactly what's relevant here, Olivia challenged him. You've spent your entire career creating technology to connect people, but you're afraid to connect yourself. You've built glass walls around your life that are higher than this tower. Her words struck with uncomfortable precision. Elijah felt exposed, vulnerable in a way he hadn't allowed himself to be in years. That's unfair, he said, an edge entering his voice. I've made difficult choices to build this company. I can't risk everything for. He hesitated. For what? Olivia pressed. For something real? Something that can't be quantified in your algorithms? For something that never should have started, he finished, immediately regretting the harshness of his words. The hurt that flashed across Olivia's face was quickly replaced by a calm dignity that made him feel small, despite his towering position. I am not a risk to be managed, she said quietly, and I am certainly not a mistake. She turned her wheelchair and moved toward the door, pausing at the threshold. For what it's worth, I believe you're making the wrong choice, not just personally, but for UrbanSync as well. True innovation doesn't come from maintaining the status quo. It comes from having the courage to reimagine what's possible. The door closed behind her with a soft click that somehow felt deafening in the sudden silence of his office. Elijah stood motionless, her words echoing in his mind. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city light spread out below him like a circuit board of countless connections, connections his technology facilitated for millions while he remained isolated in his tower. The following morning, Olivia wasn't at her desk. A formal email had arrived in his inbox overnight, a request for 2 weeks of accumulated vacation time, effective immediately. The message was professional, devoid of any personal sentiment, as if their shared experiences had been erased. Elijah approved the request automatically, telling himself this distance was for the best. Yet as the days passed, her absence created a void that extended far beyond professional inconvenience. The office felt colder, conversations less meaningful, even his beloved data less compelling, without her perspective to illuminate its human implications. One evening, he found himself standing in his immaculate penthouse looking out at the city. Everything was functioning perfectly, the temperature precisely regulated, the lighting optimized, his schedule for the next day meticulously planned by the interim assistant. Yet something essential was missing. On his desk lay a notepad Olivia had left behind, an anachronistic touch in his digital world. She had always preferred handwritten notes for her most important reminders. A single line was visible. Community. Accessibility Forum. 7 p.m. Thursday, Roxbury Innovation Center. Elijah picked up the notepad, running his fingers over the indentations of her handwriting. Such a simple thing, yet it contained more humanity than all the sophisticated technology surrounding him. In that moment, Elijah Harmon, the man who had built an empire on predictive algorithms, found himself unable to predict his own next move. For the first time in his life, the path forward couldn't be calculated or optimized. It could only be felt. Thursday evening found Elijah standing at the back of a community center in Roxbury, feeling conspicuously out of place in his designer clothes. The Accessibility Forum was already underway, with a diverse group of community members sharing experiences and proposing solutions for neighborhood improvement projects. He had come without clear intentions, driven by an unfamiliar impulse that overrode his usual calculated decision-making. Now scanning the crowded room, he felt a momentary pang of disappointment when he didn't see Olivia among the attendees. "Mr. Harmon?" A young woman approached him, recognition in her eyes. "I'm Teresa Lopez, Community Outreach Coordinator. We weren't expecting someone from Urban Sync tonight." "I'm here unofficially," he replied, suddenly self-conscious. "Is Olivia Reed attending this forum?" Teresa's expression shifted subtly. "Olivia? No, she left for Chicago 3 days ago. She's working with their Community Mobility Task Force now." The news hit Elijah with unexpected force. Chicago, where Urban Sync was expanding, where their most important negotiations were underway, where Olivia's expertise would be invaluable. And she hadn't told him. "I see," he managed, maintaining his composure through practiced discipline. "That's a valuable opportunity." "It is," Teresa agreed, studying him curiously. "Though we were surprised she accepted. She's been a fixture in our Boston accessibility advocacy community for years." Before Elijah could respond, the forum facilitator called for breakout discussions. Teresa excused herself, leaving him standing alone with the realization that Olivia had built a life of meaningful connections that extended far beyond Urban Sync, connections he knew nothing about. He stayed for the remainder of the forum, listening intently as residents described challenges he'd never considered, despite building technology meant to address urban mobility. One elderly man spoke about being unable to visit his grandchildren because bus stops lacked adequate seating. A visually impaired woman detailed the dangers of crosswalks without audible signals. A teenager in a wheelchair similar to Olivia's explained how a single step at the entrance to the community swimming pool had prevented him from joining the swim team. These weren't abstract data points, they were human stories. Exactly the kind of real-world input Olivia had been trying to incorporate into their systems all along. By the time Elijah returned to his penthouse that night, something fundamental had shifted in his understanding. He spent hours reviewing Urban Sync's flagship projects with new eyes, identifying countless oversights in their design that excluded significant portions of the population. Dawn found him still awake, standing at his window as the city slowly illuminated below him. His phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. Singapore investors confirmed for 10 a.m. Wear the blue tie. It projects stability. Elijah stared at the message, a strange calm settling over him. In that moment, the decision he'd been struggling with crystallized with perfect clarity. 3 hours later, he walked into the UrbanSync executive boardroom where Marcus and the other founding partners were assembled with the Singapore Investment Consortium. The atmosphere was tense with anticipation. This meeting could secure funding that would triple their valuation. "Gentlemen," Elijah began, deliberately omitting the blue tie Marcus had specified, "before we discuss the expansion projections, I need to address a fundamental issue with our current implementation strategy." Marcus shifted uncomfortably as Elijah activated the room's display system. Instead of the prepared investor presentation, he brought up a completely redesigned blueprint for their Chicago rollout. "Our current model prioritizes efficiency for the statistical average user," Elijah continued. "But cities aren't built for statistical averages. They're built for diverse human beings with diverse needs. Our technology should reflect that reality." For the next 30 minutes, he outlined a transformative vision for UrbanSync, one that integrated universal accessibility at every level, from physical infrastructure to user interfaces. The new approach would require additional development time and resources, but would ultimately serve a broader population and create more sustainable urban systems. When he finished, the room was silent. The lead investor from Singapore leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "This is substantially different from the proposal we were sent," he observed. "It is," Elijah acknowledged, "because it's better, more inclusive, more sustainable, and ultimately more profitable." "And more risky," Marcus interjected sharply. "Not to mention completely unauthorized. The board hasn't approved these changes." "I'm bringing them to the board now," Elijah replied calmly. What followed was the most contentious board meeting in UrbanSync's history. Marcus argued forcefully against the new direction, citing delayed timelines and increased costs. 2 other board members sided with him, while 3 cautiously aligned with Elijah's vision. The Singapore investors observed the debate with inscrutable expressions before requesting a private conference room to deliberate among themselves. Left alone with the divided board, Marcus turned on Elijah, his careful veneer of civility cracking. "Have you lost your mind? We were days away from securing the largest investment in company history." "We still might," Elijah replied. "But even if we don't, I won't build a company that systematically excludes people like Olivia from the world we're creating." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "So that's what this is about, your assistant. I knew she was a liability." "This is about integrity," Elijah corrected him, "something I've compromised too often for the sake of so-called success." "Integrity doesn't pay investors," Marcus snapped. "If you proceed with this, I'll call for a confidence vote." "That's your right as a board member," Elijah acknowledged. "But consider this. I founded this company because I believe technology could create more connected communities. I've lost sight of that mission, but I'm reclaiming it now. You can either join me or oppose me, but you can't stop me." Before Marcus could respond, the investors returned. Their spokesperson addressed the room with practiced diplomacy. "We've reviewed both proposals carefully. While Mr. Whitfield's approach offers quicker returns, Mr. Harmon's vision aligns more closely with our long-term investment philosophy. Our consortium specializes in sustainable urban development projects. Universal accessibility is not merely ethical, it's essential for truly smart cities." He turned to Elijah. "We would like to proceed with the revised proposal, with one condition. We want the architect of these accessibility features to lead their implementation. We understand she's currently in Chicago." Marcus paled visibly as Elijah struggled to maintain his composure. "Ms. Reed would be the ideal person to lead this initiative," he agreed, "assuming she's willing to return to UrbanSync." That assumption, Elijah realized as the meeting concluded, was far from certain. He had pushed Olivia away based on Marcus's narrow vision of what investors would accept, a vision that had proven entirely wrong. Now he needed to make amends, not just for the company's sake, but for his own. The following morning, Elijah's private jet landed in Chicago. The cityscape spread beneath him as they descended, a complex urban ecosystem that UrbanSync would help transform, for better or worse depending on the choices they made now. He had called ahead to the Mobility Task Force office, but received only a guarded response confirming that Olivia was indeed working with them. Her exact location was in the field, a deliberately vague answer that suggested she might not welcome his appearance. Nevertheless, Elijah had the driver take him directly to the community center where the task force was headquartered. The modest brick building in a transitioning neighborhood was worlds away from UrbanSync's gleaming corporate offices. Inside, he found a hive of activity, community organizers, urban planners, and local residents working together around cluttered tables covered with maps and diagrams. In the center of it all was Olivia, her wheelchair positioned at a table surrounded by young people, explaining something about digital navigation systems with animated gestures. She looked up as he approached, surprise flickering across her face before her expression became carefully neutral. "Elijah, this is unexpected. I need to speak with you," he said, suddenly aware of the curious glances from those around them. "I'm in the middle of a workshop," she replied, gesturing to the teenagers gathered around her. "It's important." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Give me 10 minutes to wrap up here." Those 10 minutes felt like hours as Elijah waited, watching her interact with the young people with a warmth and engagement he rarely saw in professional settings. She was in her element here, making a tangible difference in people's lives, something his algorithms alone could never accomplish. When she finally wheeled over to him, her expression was guarded. "What brings the CEO of UrbanSync to our humble community center?" "You do," he said simply, "and a realization that I've been building my company on an incomplete foundation." Olivia raised an eyebrow. "That's quite an admission. What happened?" "I went to the Roxbury Forum," Elijah began. "You weren't there, but everything you've been trying to tell me was. I heard people's stories, real humans affected by the design choices we make, and I realized that our technology isn't truly innovative if it doesn't work for everyone." Something softened in her expression, but she remained silent, waiting for him to continue. "I've restructured our entire Chicago implementation plan to center accessibility," he went on. "The Singapore investors are on board. Enthusiastically, in fact, they want you to lead the initiative." "You came all this way to offer me a job?" Olivia asked, her tone carefully. 6 months passed in a whirlwind of transformation. Olivia's return to UrbanSync as Director of Accessibility and Inclusive Design set off a cascade of changes that rippled through every level of the company. The executive floor, once an austere monument to minimalist design, now featured universal accessibility features seamlessly integrated into its aesthetic. Meeting rooms were equipped with adaptive technologies, cafeteria spaces were reconfigured for maximum inclusivity, and most importantly, every product in development underwent rigorous re-evaluation. For Elijah, the changes extended far beyond the physical workspace. Working alongside Olivia daily, he found himself evolving in ways he'd never anticipated. His natural inclination toward data and algorithms remained, but it was now balanced by a growing appreciation for human experience in all its messy, unpredictable glory. Their professional relationship blossomed into a powerful partnership. Where Elijah provided the technological vision, Olivia ensured that vision served the needs of real people in all their diversity. Together, they were creating something genuinely revolutionary, smart city technology that truly worked for everyone. Not every aspect of the transition was smooth. Marcus Whitfield remained a persistent obstacle, questioning every decision, challenging implementation timelines, and expressing constant skepticism about their new direction. Though outvoted on the board, his influence with certain investor groups gave him leverage he wasn't hesitant to use. "The quarterly projections are concerning," Marcus announced during a tense board meeting in early spring. "Our development costs have increased by 22%, while our timeline for the Chicago implementation has extended by nearly 3 months. Those figures need context," Olivia countered calmly. The increased development costs reflect our comprehensive redesign approach, which eliminates the need for expensive retrofitting later. As for the timeline, we're not just installing technology, we're building community partnerships that will ensure sustainable adoption. Noble sentiments, Marcus replied with thinly veiled condescension, but sentiment doesn't satisfy shareholders. Actually, our shareholder communications have been exceptionally well received, Elijah interjected, bringing up a dashboard of investor feedback. The Singapore consortium has increased their stake by 15%, based specifically on our inclusive redesign. They see this as future-proofing their investment. The meeting continued in this vein, with Marcus raising objections that Elijah and Olivia systematically dismantled with data, case studies, and preliminary results from their pilot programs. By the end, even the skeptical board members were leaning toward their vision. After the meeting, Elijah and Olivia found themselves alone in his office, reviewing the confrontation. "He's not going to stop," Olivia observed, her expression troubled. "Marcus fundamentally disagrees with our approach." "Marcus is afraid of change," Elijah replied, "but he's also a pragmatist. Once the Chicago implementation proves successful, his objections will become harder to maintain." Olivia smiled wryly. "You're still an optimist beneath all that analytical thinking." "You've had a bad influence on me," he replied, returning her smile. These moments between them had grown more frequent, quiet exchanges of warmth and understanding that went beyond their professional collaboration. They had maintained careful boundaries since her return, focusing on rebuilding their working relationship and the trust that had been damaged. But the connection between them remained, evolving into something deeper and more substantial than before. Both were aware of it, though neither had yet taken the step to acknowledge it directly. There was too much at stake professionally, too many watchful eyes monitoring their every interaction. Marcus, in particular, seemed to be waiting for any sign of impropriety to weaponize against their leadership. The Chicago launch became their primary focus as spring turned to summer. They traveled there frequently, working closely with community organizations, city officials, and the young consultants Olivia had recruited from her previous project. The implementation was ambitious, a comprehensive urban mobility system that integrated everything from traffic management to pedestrian navigation, all designed with universal accessibility as a core feature rather than an afterthought. 2 weeks before the official launch, Elijah and Olivia were in Chicago for final testing when the anonymous email arrived. Addressed to every board member and key investor, it contained a carefully crafted narrative, suggesting that Olivia's rapid rise within the company was based on favoritism rather than merit, with pointed insinuations about the nature of her relationship with Elijah. The email included carefully selected photos of them working late together, having dinner during business trips, and talking closely during company events, all presented with suggestive captions that transformed innocent moments into something that appeared improper. The board called an emergency meeting. Though most members saw the attack for what it was, the publicity implications couldn't be ignored. Several media outlets had already picked up the story, framing it as a scandal brewing within one of tech's most innovative companies. "This is precisely what I warned about," Marcus said during the virtual meeting, his tone grave. "Perception matters in our position. The Chicago launch is now overshadowed by these unfortunate allegations. Allegations based on manipulated information that you likely provided," Elijah replied coldly, his suspicions clear. Marcus's expression remained impassive. "That's a serious accusation, Elijah, and beside the point. The damage is done. We need to manage this crisis before it affects our stock price further." "And what exactly are you suggesting?" Olivia asked, her voice steady despite the situation. "A temporary reassignment," Marcus proposed smoothly. "Ms. Reed should step back from the Chicago launch and any direct reporting to Elijah until an independent review can be conducted. For appearance's sake." The suggestion hung in the air, its real intention clear to everyone. This was Marcus's move to undermine the changes they'd implemented and reassert control over the company's direction. Elijah looked at Olivia, seeing the complex emotions behind her composed exterior. 6 months earlier, he had made the wrong choice in a similar moment of pressure. The memory of that mistake and its consequences was still fresh. "No," he said firmly. "Absolutely not." "Elijah," Marcus began. "No," Elijah repeated, standing up. "I will not allow manufactured allegations to derail the most important launch in our company's history. Olivia is not being reassigned, temporarily or otherwise. Her leadership is essential to this project's success." "The board needs to consider," Marcus tried again. "The board needs to recognize a deliberate sabotage attempt when they see one." Elijah interrupted. "I've tolerated your opposition, Marcus, because diverse perspectives strengthen decision-making. But this crosses a line." He looked around at the other board members, his resolve unwavering. "If anyone believes these allegations have merit, speak now. Otherwise, I suggest we focus on our actual responsibilities to this company and its mission." The silence that followed was broken by the lead investor from Singapore. "I have observed the working relationship between Mr. Harmon and Ms. Reed extensively over the past 6 months. Their partnership has transformed this company for the better. I see no basis for these allegations, and I fully support their continued leadership." One by one, the other board members expressed similar sentiments, leaving Marcus isolated in his position. The meeting concluded with a unanimous decision, minus Marcus, to proceed with the Chicago launch as planned and to issue a strong statement supporting both Elijah and Olivia. As the virtual meeting ended, Elijah turned to Olivia in their Chicago hotel conference room. "I'm sorry you had to experience that." "It's not your fault," she replied, though the strain of the situation showed in her eyes. "It is, in a way," he admitted. "Marcus targeted you because of me, because he knows undermining you is the most effective way to attack our vision." "And yet you didn't waver this time," Olivia observed, a small smile softening her features. "No retreat." "No retreat," Elijah confirmed. "I made you a promise." The moment between them stretched, filled with unspoken emotions. For months they had maintained careful professional boundaries, focused on their shared vision for UrbanSync. But now, having faced this challenge together, something had shifted yet again. "We should prepare for tomorrow's community demonstration," Olivia said finally, breaking the tension. "The youth consultants have been testing the navigation features all week." "Of course," Elijah agreed, gathering his tablet. But as they worked through the evening, reviewing final implementation details and preparing for the public demonstration, a new sense of possibility seemed to hover between them. The Chicago launch exceeded even their ambitious expectations. The community demonstration became a celebration, as residents experienced firsthand how the new systems would transform urban mobility for everyone. The youth consultants proudly showcased features they had helped design. City officials praised the collaborative approach that had integrated community needs from the beginning. Media. Coverage turned decidedly positive, with headlines highlighting the innovative accessibility features and UrbanSync's community-centered development process. The anonymous allegations were relegated to brief mentions, overshadowed by the tangible success of the implementation. 3 days after the launch, Elijah and Olivia found themselves at a community celebration in the same neighborhood where they had reconnected 6 months earlier. Tables lined the blocked-off street, laden with food contributed by local restaurants. String lights crisscrossed overhead, illuminating the gathering as dusk settled over the city. Olivia was at the center of a group of the young consultants, laughing as they showed her videos of users interacting with the navigation systems they had helped design. Her joy in that moment was radiant, unguarded in a way Elijah rarely saw in professional settings. He approached slowly, waiting for a natural break in the conversation. When the young people moved on to demonstrate their work to other guests, Elijah stepped forward. "This is what success really looks like," he said, gesturing to the celebration around them. "Not stock prices or market share, but actual human impact." "Another non-analytical observation," Olivia teased gently. "You're making progress." "I had an excellent teacher," he replied. Live music started playing from a small stage at the end of the street. a local band with an infectious rhythm that immediately drew people to the cleared space in front of them. Elijah held out his hand to Olivia. "Would you care to dance?" She looked at his offered hand, surprise and something warmer flickering across her expression. "You dance now too?" "Poorly," he admitted with a smile. "But I'm willing to learn." After a moment's hesitation, Olivia accepted his hand. "I'm not sure how this works," she said, glancing at her wheelchair. "We'll figure it out together," Elijah replied, echoing her words from months before. One step at a time. What followed wasn't technically dancing by any standard definition. Elijah moved awkwardly to the music, while Olivia wheeled alongside him, both of them laughing at his lack of rhythm. Yet in that imperfect movement, they found a perfect synchronicity. Two people who had learned to navigate around each other's strengths and limitations, creating something beautiful in the process. As the music shifted to a slower tempo, Elijah knelt beside Olivia's chair, bringing them face to face. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For showing me what I couldn't see from my glass tower. For teaching me that the most valuable connections can't be quantified in data points. For not giving up on me, even when I gave you every reason to." Olivia's eyes softened. "You've changed a lot since that power outage night." "I had to," he replied. "Some algorithms need complete recalibration when new variables are introduced." She laughed softly. "Still speaking in code, I see." "Then let me be clearer," Elijah said, taking her hand. "I'm in love with you, Olivia Reed. Not just with your brilliance or your strength, though I admire both immensely. I'm in love with the way you see the world, the way you fight for what matters, the way you've helped me become a better version of myself." The words hung between them, honest and exposed in the warm evening air. For a man who had spent his life calculating risks and probabilities, this was the greatest leap of faith he had ever taken. Olivia's free hand moved to touch his face gently. "Falling in love with you wasn't in my career plan," she said, her eyes bright with emotion. "But some of the best things in life come from unexpected directions." "Is that a yes?" Elijah asked, hope rising in his chest. "A yes to what?" "You haven't actually asked me anything," she pointed out with a smile. "Fair point," he acknowledged. "Olivia Reed, would you consider embarking on a personal partnership to complement our professional one? With appropriate corporate governance safeguards, of course." She laughed, the sound bright and beautiful in the evening air. "How you really are incapable of not being analytical, aren't you?" "I'm working on it," he promised. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes to figuring this out together. Yes to seeing where this leads. Yes to you, Elijah Harmon, with all your algorithms, and analytical thinking, and newly discovered capacity for change." As Elijah leaned forward to kiss her, the boundaries they had carefully maintained for months dissolved. Around them, the celebration continued, people connected by technology, community, and shared purpose. It was exactly the world they had been working to create, one where differences became strengths, where obstacles became opportunities, where genuine connection transcended artificial barriers. Later that night, as they walked together under the string lights of the community celebration, he beside her wheelchair, Elijah reflected on the long, unexpected journey that had brought them to this moment. From that first meeting in his sterile penthouse to this vibrant street filled with music and laughter, they had transformed not just a company, but each other. "What are you thinking about?" Olivia asked, noting his thoughtful expression. "I'm thinking that for someone who built a career on predictive algorithms, I never could have predicted this," he replied, smiling down at her. "That's the beautiful thing about life," she said. "The best parts are often the least predictable." As they moved through the celebration, greeting community members and young consultants with equal warmth, Elijah understood finally that his most significant innovation wasn't technological at all. It was the human connection he had found with Olivia, a connection that had fundamentally recalibrated his understanding of success, value, and purpose. Together, they had created a new algorithm for living, one that balanced data with empathy, efficiency with inclusivity, and individual achievement with collective well-being. It wasn't perfect, and it would require constant refinement as they faced new challenges. But like the best algorithms, its strength lay not in rigid perfection, but in its ability to learn, adapt, and evolve. And in that evolution lay the promise of something truly revolutionary, a future designed not just for some, but for everyone. Fimda Historia. Dear listeners, we hope you've been moved by Elijah and Olivia's journey from isolation to connection. Their story reminds us that true innovation comes not just from technology, but from opening ourselves to new perspectives and possibilities. For more emotionally powerful narratives like this one, find our special playlist by clicking to your left. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day we bring you unique stories that explore the complexity and beauty of human connection. We can't wait to see your thoughts in the comments section below.